How does a town pull itself back from the absolute brink? Well, sometimes it's not about some grand unified plan. Sometimes it's actually about a fierce rivalry. And that's exactly the story we're getting into today, the story of Seaford. It was this rundown 19th century coastal town that was saved, believe it or not, by the epic clash between two super ambitious developers.
To really get what a huge deal this was, you gotta understand what they were starting with. On one side, you had the grim reality of Seaford in the mid-1800s. It was a rotten borough, constantly flooding, and had, let's just say, a pretty sketchy reputation. But on the other hand, you had this incredible, almost dreamlike vision for its future, a fancy, modern health resort. The gap between those two? It was just massive, and it took a couple of titanic egos to even try to bridge it.
All right, so here's how we're going to walk through this incredible story. We'll start with just how bad things were in Seaford. Then we'll meet our two visionaries. We'll see how they actually teamed up for a massive project, then watch it all fall apart in a huge public fight. And finally, see how a modern town was born from the ashes of all that conflict.
Okay, first up, let's really set the scene. We need to go back to a town that was, to put it gently, just falling apart. This was the Seaford our two developers stumbled into, a place right on the edge.
Now that term rotten borough, it had a very specific political meaning, about corruption. But for Seaford, the rot was kind of literal too. The town itself was physically decaying and it was constantly getting slammed by the sea. We're talking frequent, devastating floods.
And the town's reputation, wow. The locals were actually called Seaford Shags. The name basically compared them to cormorants because they were famous for wrecking. And this wasn't just a couple of people stealing things. When a ship wrecked on their coast, it was like a community free-for-all. They would just loot everything. And historical records show it wasn't just the poor. Even prominent citizens, magistrates, even ministers were in on it.
So, into this mess step our two main characters, two incredibly powerful guys who looked at this decaying town and saw something completely different. They didn't see what it was, they saw what it could be.
And this really sets up the whole dynamic perfectly. On one side, you've got Dr. William Tyler Smith. He's a big-shot London medical pioneer, an outsider with this huge health-focused vision for the town. And on the other side, Thomas Crook. He's a major local landowner, a guy who's already there, on the ground, building the town's basic infrastructure. You've got two very different men, and you just know they're destined to collide.
Dr. Smith's plan was really something else. As a top obstetrician, he wanted to take all these modern ideas about medical hygiene and apply them to city planning. He started buying up land to build sea defenses, he set up a special hospital for patients recovering from London, all because he truly believed that Seaford's bracing sea air was the ultimate cure. He basically saw the whole town as one giant open-air health clinic.
But here's the thing, let's not forget about Thomas Crook. He was a powerhouse in his own right. While Dr. Smith was dreaming about his health utopia, Crook was busy dealing with the nuts and bolts of a modern town. He'd already started a gas works to get streetlights up and running, and he was building new schools. He was a big deal locally, and he was just as invested in Seaford's future.
So despite their totally different ways of doing things and this growing rivalry, there was one project that was so big, so important, that it actually forced these two to work together.
It all kicked off in October 1860. Smith and Crook became the driving forces, as they were called, behind this big public meeting to get a railway line into Seaford. And this was a massive project. They started construction in 1863, and just over a year later, the very first train pulled into town, finally connecting this isolated place to the rest of the world.
And the sheer scale of what they did together, it's mind-boggling. They helped raise £24,000, which was an absolute fortune back then, to get this thing funded. For a little while, it really looked like their combined power could overcome any personal rivalry. But, yeah, that moment was not going to last.
And this is where the whole story turns. That fragile alliance they built for the railway, it completely shattered when the fight turned to the town's most valuable piece of real estate, the seafront. Their competition just exploded into a full-on legal war. The court case was officially Crook versus the Corporation of Seaford. But let's be real, this was a proxy battle. It was Thomas Crook versus the man who had become the most powerful person in that corporation, Dr. Tyler Smith. And this isn't just some old town legend. We have the receipts. This here is a page from the actual court report from 1870, laying out every single argument. Their private feud was now a bitter public fight for the soul of Seaford's future.
Okay, so here's the heart of it. Crook had a plan to develop the seafront, But he claimed that Dr. Smith, who, get this, had been elected as the town's bailiff, which is basically the mayor, 5 times, used his incredible political power to block Crook's lease. Crook was convinced that Smith was just strong-arming him out of the way to clear a path for his own development plans. It was a classic raw power play.
So what happened? Who won? Well, it's funny. In a way, the town itself won. The modern Seaford that we see today was shaped just as much by their bitter conflict as it was by their brief cooperation.
When you actually look at what got built, you see both of their fingerprints all over the place. The railway they built together, the sea defenses, and a big hotel that Smith financed, the gasworks and schools that Crook established. The town absolutely became the health resort Smith dreamed of, but it ran on the modern infrastructure that Crook put in place.
And that's really the big takeaway here, isn't it? Progress isn't always neat and tidy. Seaford wasn't saved by some perfect master plan. It was forged in the fire of this intense rivalry, with these two powerful guys pushing and pulling, sometimes on the same team, but often against each other. And in the end, they built something that neither of them could have ever done alone.
It really leaves you with a fascinating question to chew on. We're always told that collaboration and unity are the way forward, but the story of Seaford, well, it suggests something a lot more complicated. That maybe, just maybe, it's the friction of two competing ambitions that actually sparks the fire of creation. So, can conflict, not just cooperation, actually build a better future?